Information is often restricted or scoped to limit its access. You'd expect a letter put in a mailbox to be only for the person who owns the box, and a poster out on a pole to be accessible to anyone. So data in a mailbox is scoped to that mailbox, and data on a pole is globally scoped and available to everyone. In programming, scope determines which variables are accessible from which parts of the application. There are three main types of scope in JavaScript: block scope, function scope, and global scope. Recall that in JavaScript, a block is a set of statements within curly braces. Here we have two blocks, one for the if and the other for the else. If we declare a variable within a block using let or const, the variable has block scope. That means that these variables declared within the block can only be accessed from within that block. In this example, since we declared the message variables within each block, we get an error when we try to access it outside of the block. Block scope is a new-ish feature that was introduced in ES6, also called ES 2015. Note that variables declared using var do not support block scope. Use let or const instead. A function defines a set of code for a specific task. The body of the function contains one or more statements to achieve that task. Here we have a process guess function that checks the user's guess. Variables we declare within a function, outside of any other blocks, have function scope. The variable is local to that function and only accessible within that function. In this example, the message is declared with function scope, so we can access it within the function. This includes any statement blocks within that function, but not outside of the function. Any variable we declare outside of any function or JavaScript block has global scope, meaning it can be accessed from anywhere else in the JavaScript code. Here we declare a variable outside of the function or any block, so it has global scope. We can then access the variable from within the main flow, within any function, and within any block. It's often best practice to declare globally scoped variables at the top of the script file, so they are easy to find. Let's see variable scope in action. We'll declare variables with different scope to see where they can be accessed. We are again back in VS Code with our Guess a Number folder open on the left, and our page is running in the browser on the right, with the developer tools open. Let's start by deleting the feedback text variable here at the top. Then in our if block, instead of logging the value right away, we'll declare a block scope variable, let feedback text equal, and assign it to the message string. Be sure to remove the remaining parentheses. We'll do the same in the else block. After the block, we'll log the value of the variable, console.log, the feedback, comma, feedback text, semicolon. Looking at the console, as expected, we see an error that the feedback text variable is not defined. That's because the variables are declared in the block, so are scoped to that block, and can only be used within that block. Now let's try function scope. At the bottom of the file, we'll create a function called processGuess. It has no parameters, but we still need the parentheses. We'll cut our if and else blocks and the console.log from up here and paste them into the function. Now let's change our feedback text variable from block to function scope by adding the declaration at the top of the function, outside of any block. We then remove the let keyword within the if and else blocks. Since our variable is declared here, we don't need to declare it again. Rather, we assign it a value. Notice we see no feedback message for the feedback text in the console. Any idea why? Yep, this function is not being called in our main flow. We'll call it up here. It has no parameters, so the parentheses are empty. Now we see the message in the console. If we copy the console log from our new function and paste it after the function out in the main flow, we'll see an error in the console. Feedback text is not defined. That's because the feedback text variable is function scoped and not available outside of the function. Let's delete that line to get rid of our error. We've already been using global scope. Scrolling up, the variables we've declared at the top of the file are globally scoped and can be used anywhere in the code. Let's delete the empty line and go back to the slides. So, scope determines which variables are accessible from which parts of the application. With block scope, variables declared with let and const in a block are only accessible within that block. With function scope, variables declared in a function are only accessible within that function. And with global scope, variables declared outside of a function or block are accessible anywhere in the JavaScript file. Let's talk about JavaScript objects and the DOM next. Lots of great info in this video. If you learned something new, please like and subscribe.